The proletariat created by the breaking up of the bands of feudal retainers and by the forcible expropriation of the people from the soil, this quote unquote free proletariat could not possibly be absorbed by the nascent manufacturers as fast as it was thrown upon the world. On the other hand, these men, suddenly dragged from their wonted mode of life, could not as suddenly adapt to the discipline of their new condition, obviously. They were turned en masse into beggars, robbers, vagabonds, partly from inclination, in most cases, however, from stress of circumstances. Hence, at the end of the 15th and during the whole of the 16th century, throughout Western Europe, a bloody legislation against vagabondage came into being. The fathers of the present working class were chastised for their enforced transformation into vagabonds and paupers. Legislation treated them as voluntary criminals and assumed that it depended on their own goodwill to go on working under the old conditions that no longer existed. In England, this legislation began under Henry VII. Henry VIII in 1530, beggars old and unable to work receive a beggar's license. On the other hand, whipping and imprisonment for sturdy vagabonds. They are to be tied to the cart tail and whipped until the blood streams from their bodies. Then to swear an oath to go back to their birthplace or to where they have lived the last 3 years and to put themselves to labor. What grim irony! In 27, Henry VIII, the former statute is repeated, but strengthened with new clauses. For the second arrest for vagabondage, the whipping is to be repeated and half the ear sliced off. But for the third relapse, the offender is to be executed as a hardened criminal, an enemy of the commonweal. Edward VI, a statute of the first year of his reign, came into being in 1547. It ordains that if anyone refuses to work, he shall be condemned as a slave to the person who has denounced him as an idler. The master shall feed his slave on bread and water, weak broth, and such refuse meat as he thinks fit. He has the right to force him to do any work, no matter how disgusting, with whip and chains. If the slave is absent a fortnight, he is condemned to slavery for life and is to be branded on forehead or back with the letter S. If he runs away thrice, he is to be executed as a felon. The master can sell him, bequeath him, let him out on hire as a slave, just as any other personal chattel or cattle. If the slaves attempt anything against the masters, they are also to be executed. Justices of the peace, who used to be appointed people in England back in the day, on information are to hunt the rascals down. If it happens that a vagabond has been idling about for 3 days, he is to be taken to his birthplace, branded with a red-hot iron with the letter V on the breast, and be set to work in chains in the streets or at some other labor. If the vagabond gives a false birthplace, he is then to become the slave for life of this place, of its inhabitants, or its corporation, and to be branded with an S. All persons have the right to take away the children of the vagabonds and to keep them as apprentices, the young men until the 24th year, the girls until the 20th. If they run away, they are to become up to this age the slaves of their masters, who can put them in irons, whip them, etc., if they like. Every master may put an iron ring round the neck, arms, or legs of his slave, by which to know him more easily and to be more certain of him. The last part of this statute provides that certain poor people may be employed by a place or by persons who are willing to give them food and drink and to find them work. This kind of parish slaves was kept up in England until far into the 19th century under the name of roundsmen. Similarly, in Elizabeth 1572, unlicensed beggars above 14 years of age are to be severely flogged and branded on the left ear until someone will take them into service for 2 years. In case of a repetition of the offense, if they are over 18, they are to be executed unless someone will take them into service for 2 years, but for the third offense, they are to be executed without mercy as felons. Similar statutes came in 18 Elizabeth, another of 1597. James I, anyone wandering about and begging is declared a rogue and a vagabond. Justices of the peace in petty sessions are authorized to have them publicly whipped, and for the first offense to imprison them for 6 months, for the second up to 2 years. Whilst in prison, they are to be whipped as much and as often as the justices of the peace think fit. Incorrigible and dangerous rogues are to be branded with an R on the left shoulder and set to hard labor, and if they are caught begging again, to be executed without mercy. These statutes, legally binding until the beginning of the 18th century, were only repealed by 12 Anne, circa 23. Similar laws in France, where by the middle of the 17th century, a kingdom of vagabonds was established in Paris. Even at the beginning of Louis XVI's reign, Ordinance of July 13, 1777, every man in good health from 16 to 60 years of age, if without means of subsistence and not practicing a trade, is to be sent to the galleys. Of the same nature are the Statute of Charles V for Netherlands, the First Edict of the States and Towns of Holland, the Placat of the United Provinces, which came in June 26, 1649, etc. Thus were the agricultural people first forcibly expropriated from the soil, driven from their homes, turned into vagabonds, then whipped, branded, tortured by laws grotesquely terrible, into the discipline necessary for the wage system.